This is The Collective Voice, and you're tuning into Belonging, a conversation with young adults finding their place in communities of faith. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this episode of The Collective Voice. I'm Reverend Phil Dickey, and I'm joined with my colleague Jade here, and we're excited for this episode of Belong. Today's episode of Belong is in conversation with our friends from the Episcopals. Jade, do you want to share a little bit who the Episcopals are?
Yes, and did you mean belonging?
Did I say belong? Yes, belonging.
Yes,
Thank you for that clarification.
though we like the noun as well.
Belong and belonging. Thank
The
you.
belong.
I'm a fan of gerunds as well. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so today we have with us three wonderful people who are representatives of Episcopals, which is a young adult group housed out of St. David's Episcopal Church here in Austin, Texas. We're so excited to have each of you here. You all are leaders in the church generally, and so I'm gonna just kind of give a little bit of a bio for each of you all. We have Sarah, who is, in addition to her full-time work, works part-time as an assistant youth minister, young adult minister as well. And then we have Cameron, who is an ordained priest, which is really cool. And last but not least, we also have Kelsey, who is the current director of youth and young adult ministries at St. David's and is the Episcopal's leader. And so, Kelsey, I wanted to ask if you might share a few words just to describe maybe what Episcopals is like, or when it started, or just kind of just give us an origin story of this group.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jade. I'm thrilled to be here. I will say it's going to be a lot to do in just a few words, so let's think through. Episcopals is a ministry for young adults in their 20s and 30s. We roughly go from 22 through 40, basically after college and before your 40s. We meet every other Thursday throughout Austin at restaurants and members' houses. And currently we kind of have an on-off rhythm where we do one session a month where we're doing more formation-based things where we have speakers come in and talk to us about things they're passionate about. So we've had talks on death and finances and just all kinds of things. Whatever you might be interested in is kind of the direction we try to go with those formational-based opportunities. And then
I just love that you said death and financing. Those two are the two examples you gave and how they pair so well together. That's really good.
Yeah, death and taxes, the Christian story. Go ahead, Sarah. You have
both
something you
were
want
at
to say.
mine. They were both ideas, and I hosted both of them. So
we're not territorial at
they were
all.
huge hits, I have to say.
Love that for you. Love that for y'all.
Yes. So our formational ones are super cool. We get a chance to talk to one another about deeper topics, specifically with kind of an expert. I put quotes around that, but somebody who's comfortable talking about that subject in the room with us. And then the other half of the time that we meet, we do just fun. So maybe we go to Topgolf, or we go and paint somewhere, or we've got a Central Market coming up soon where we're going to go do some crafts at Central Market. So yeah, we kind of just get together and hang out. And we also, sometimes talk about God. So
Love it.
I've got 1 month left before I would age out of Episcopals. I feel like I need to get on it real fast and come down and experience this before I am no longer eligible.
Yeah, hop in quick.
Yeah.
It's now or never, my friend.
Now or never.
Never.
Sarah, never?
Sarah said never.
No, I'm expressing dang, Kelsey's laying on the law. Now or never.
Listen,
Oh yeah.
you gotta have clarity of purpose. You gotta have clarity of purpose with your ministry.
I appreciate that a lot.
And speaking of the clarity, I love the name of the group, and I want to know who is the clever cat who came up with that? Because come on, it couldn't be more clear and specific.
Sarah and Cameron, do you guys have any recollection of who it was that coined this?
That is such a good question. I haven't thought about that actually I don't know. It must have come about. It had. I don't remember.
One said person. My memory is that that first meeting or two at Jenny Campbell's apartment, there was a nameless identity among the group. And the next clear memory I have is just casual conversations of that coming up as a silly placeholder. And as can often happen in church ministry, the thing that was an interim became eternal as far as the system is concerned.
That's ringing a bell for me, Cameron. I feel like I'm remembering that like we didn't know what to name it. And then somebody was like, oh, we could be the EpiscoPals because we all like each other. And we were like, sure. And I actually remember us jokingly talking about it later, being like, I can't believe I have to invite my friends to some group called the EpiscoPals. Like, oh my gosh, this is so cringy. But
yeah, that I don't know, but I do remember that. Like when I remember I that may have been me. Like I was like,
it was you.
We're called the EpiscoPals, and it was, but it was too late at that point. That was our name.
Yeah, we were invested then.
And this was circa 2019?
Oh, what a great question. Yeah, we got started in early 2020, maybe right at the tail end of 2019. But we only had a chance to meet like a handful of times, I feel like, in person before the pandemic hit and we moved online.
Gotcha.
I think it was literally like 2 or 3 times.
Wow.
Like not, it was not not a lot of them.
It wasn't. It wasn't. And then we moved online, but honestly, I felt like that solidified us so fast because we were all so like isolated that we were then able to like tune in. At that point, we were going every single week and we would tune in every Thursday night and be like, oh my gosh, okay, hello, lifeline to civilization. How are y'all doing? How are we all faring? I feel like in so many ways it like formed our community in such a firm foundation.
Really?
Because we really just didn't have a whole lot else to rely on.
Okay, so I feel like we'll come back to that when we talk a little bit more about belonging, because that seems really important. But we want to take a moment to just think about, when we spoke and when you all filled out the forms for this, we talked about what type of spiritual practices you all engage in your day-to-day lives. That feed your soul, that give you a sense of purpose and understanding and help you in your faith journey. And Kelsey, you are so kind to share with us some poetry. But before we talk about the poem you're going to share today, can you just share with us how or when it was that you started to utilize poems or poetry as a sort of spiritual practice in your life?
Yeah, actually, I think also kind of during the pandemic, especially like very early on when we were like so scared to go outside, at least I was, I turned to Mary Oliver. Like I found some books of hers at my local Half Price Books, and the way that she talked about nature really got me going. So I was like, yeah, you're right. I love trees, Mary. You are so right about that. So like, I think the way that she talks and the way that she engages with nature really helped me feel like connected to something when I felt really isolated and alone. And so that kind of like, that started in my personal life. And then fast forward to, I don't know, maybe this last year. So I'm the young adult minister here, but I'm also the youth minister, which means I work with 6th through 12th graders. And so what part of my job is coming up with a devotional every single week. And I would turn to this like one devotional book that I would use frequently. And I was like, just suddenly found that it wasn't working anymore. Like everything felt very like condescending or eccentric or silly. Like it just wasn't hitting. It wasn't as relevant as I needed it to be with my teens. And so I started pulling out these books of poetry that I had like bought from people I had seen speak, like authors and stuff. And like folks that I had engaged with online, like I follow their Instagram or something, and I had bought their book sometime along the way. And so I started pulling these out to see like, well, instead of reading like a little prose devotional, what if I just read a poem and asked the students like what they were feeling? And so I started doing that, and that really like clicked for me as a way to like, I'm really excited about using words to connect with people, to connect with God, to connect with stories. And so that's kind of, I guess, how I started using poetry as like a spiritual practice, and a way for me to get outside of myself and think like, I have, like going back to Mary Oliver, I have never looked at a tree like that before. Like, thank you, Mary, for that complete perspective shift. And I feel like, poetry about God is the same way. Like, oh, I've never considered There's this lovely poem about Jesus as a young boy, experiencing like death for the first time. And I was like, oh, I'd never considered like, Jesus's little kid emotions, and experiencing this. So I don't know, like that kind of thing. I just love the perspective shift in the way that it, helps me get outside myself.
That's so fantastic. Like, thank you for that. Like, it just reminds me of, one, how much I love poetry as well, and two, that when in doubt, just go back among the trees. Like, the trees have so much to teach us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So good.
And also, you bring up a point about the way that the people we're serving will force us into sort of creative and innovative places that we wouldn't have gone otherwise. And we're the better for it in our personal lives. And so that's really exciting. And so what are you sharing with us today?
Well, since I brought it up, I am going to read the one about Jesus experiencing death. Sorry, it's sad, but it's just really beautiful.
You don't have to apologize for sadness.
To be clear, I don't write poetry. That's not my vibe. I read. So this is a poem from The Vanishing Song by Jay Hulme, who's an amazing trans poet. Sarah is giving me a thumbs up right now because she went with me to see him come and speak recently. He's a great trans poet from the UK, and I love him. So yeah. Anywho, this is a poem called Jesus Encounters Death for the First Time. And man, I hope this doesn't bring down the whole mood of the podcast. So like, I don't know, get into the vibes of poetry, and
we're just flowing.
Like, move on, okay?
Well, let's offer this introduction too, right? Is that an invitation to insert yourself into the narrative of Jesus's life in ways that we haven't been invited to, is one, a really fantastic spiritual practice, and two, probably very uncomfortable for us, right? Because it reminds us of the humanity of Jesus, and for so often we love to think of the divinity of Jesus, but this invites us to embrace the humanity that Jesus experienced as well. So yeah, I'm with you, Kelsey. It might change the vibe a little bit, but you know what? Vibes come and go and move and shift, and we were here for it.
Okay.
Right.
Awesome.
Also, my research is on death rituals, so I'm definitely all ears.
Are we going to spend this whole podcast talking about death? Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
Nothing says belonging quite like talking about death, It is the one thing that really unites all of us,
real,
really,
though.
That's true.
Okay, Lord, we hear you.
All right, this is Jesus Encounters Death for the First Time. When the donkey died, he went to his mother. His cries saying, "Oh, Mama, he has gone, and I cannot see where. Oh, why does this happen? And how can we stand it? And why can't we counter this wrong?" And his tears turned the dust into mud, and it clung to his palms, and he raised them to the corpse. And if his mother had not gathered him up in her arms, he'd have commanded that body to rise and walk.
Will you say the name of that poet again, please?
Yeah, it's Jay Hulme. It's spelled Jayhulme.
I love that it was a donkey. I did not see that one coming. That was an immediate shift for me, so that was great.
I love engaging with these kinds of things because it's not like you have to read that and go, yes, this is canon. This is what's happened. Like, I like that it invites us to play in the story of Jesus' life on earth.
And I'll piggyback off of something you just said, Kelsey, because as I was reading that, I was thinking about one thing that is canon, so to speak. Jesus wept, which was when confronting death as well. And there's a question that I've heard before. Well, let me rephrase that. I am going to riff on a different question that I've heard talking about Christology, which is, does your Christology have space for everything that it is documented Jesus did? And I'm thinking about him crying before Lazarus. I'm thinking about the sign in Mark where he, depending on what translation you read, he called the woman a dog and or something a little worse than that. Making space for a more holistic picture than what we might default into if we're not careful can be a good and holy thing.
Hey, Cameron, love you so much. What does Christology mean?
Thank you. In this TED Talk that has just become EpiscoPals Part 2.
That was amazing. That was amazing, Sarah.
I don't know what that means.
When you think about, are we deviating too much from death here? I don't want to get us away from the awesome, rich content.
We're flowing.
a person with a high Christology might be more keen to emphasize Jesus's divinity. It's Christ. You hear the word Christ at the start of that. Might be more keen to emphasize Jesus's divinity and lordship, and neither of this is to say they mutually exclude the other one. But a person with a low Christology might be a little more emphasizing on Jesus's humanity.
Okay, I think I understand. Thank you.
So, like, in our practice, in our understanding of Christology, maybe I'm extrapolating too much, but should we, I guess, try to aim for something in between? Because we have to own that Jesus was both divine and human.
Well, it's fitting that you just mentioned a trans poet, because like many binaries and spectrums, there's hopefully going to be space for multiple options and not just one point on it per se. I do think it can be, like, I've said this before, like if a person is tackling a story or a sermon they heard or something that doesn't quite sit right with them, one indicator of that could be that speaker's Christology is a little different from where yours is on any given day. So like many aspects of theology, the self-awareness can help you have more understanding of how you know about God. In addition to what you know about God.
Jay does a lot, like the talk that we went to go see Jay speak about was about cathedrals being trans, like having trans bodies, which was fascinating.
It was so cool.
Yeah.
Okay, break it down.
Yeah, he talked about, y'all should try to have him on the podcast. He was wonderful. He talked about how cathedrals were, like, you never finish them in a lifetime. There's still some of them that are not completed. And they were constantly being added upon. Stuff was falling down and then repaired. New styles were introduced at all of these different points. He showed us several different things just about the different kinds of windows and arches in cathedrals, and how if you go and look at many of them, there will be these, like sometimes even literally side by side, these different styles of arches that are from two completely distinct styles from different centuries even. And they're just right next to each other. And it's all part of the, I was going to say charm, but charm doesn't really, that's not really probably the right word for a cathedral. It's all sort of accepted and understood, and kind of like that is part of the cathedral. It's part of their story. It represents kind of, again, just with exception, with acceptance, I guess I should say, that is still like a building that was built to glorify God. You know, as tall as you could get to be, you know, the ceilings were painted to look like the heavens. And so Jay's, you know, as a trans man, was kind of just drawing the comparison between that and how we talk about trans bodies. And I don't want to, like, I don't want to get off onto that too much, because I am not trans, and that would be actually getting into his experience as a trans man. But we found it was fascinating. And very moving, because he also is obsessed with cathedrals. Like, it's, if you've ever watched, I mean, I think we all have something like this probably, but watching someone talk about something that they're like extremely fascinated about is just awesome. And so it was just a really great talk about, go ahead, Cameron.
Well, if we still more free association, by the way, this windfall of tangents is a pretty good microcosm of what Episcopals events can look like, just to keep us on theme. I was going to ask that.
I was like, is this how a typical Episcopal night goes? Because I'm all in for this.
But here's two different forked thoughts that come to my mind in response to what you said, Sarah. And I don't think either of these transgress, prefix pun unintended, upon Jay's experience. But one is a sermon I've preached that y'all both heard. It was at Jenny's farewell. I have preached before how God is pro-trans, and I'm careful to point out that while you can draw a line to that to explicit topics, I often mean that as part of a wider umbrella truth. The literary definition of that prefix is across or beyond. That's all that it is. And how many scripture stories or personal testimonies can you draw upon where there is a call upon a person to walk on water, or go into the wilderness, or be beckoned to a place that is well beyond their comfort zone? And I hadn't heard that talk about cathedrals before. I really like that, but I'm thinking about how in liturgy, we often say that no matter what you might want as the planner, the space wins, which is just acknowledging that it's fair to acknowledge the physical environment that you are in, and changed spaces, both one that changes over time and just going from one church building to another on a given week, naturally invites the opposite of cookie cutter copy and pasting.
That was actually, there's one that he talked about. I can't remember which cathedral it was, but there was one that he brought up that he explained that it was built on like a swamp, basically, like a marsh. And it's completely unstable. Like it's just like floating, basically. Like the land is not supportive enough to really hold the kind of building that is there. And they just have to maintain it. Like it's just there. I wish I could remember.
This in the US?
No, this is in the UK. This is like an ancient.
Oh, that's right. Sorry. Yeah.
No, it's just been there for centuries, kind of like floating on top of this like shaly land. And they've just had to kind of prop it up. It's just there. I wish I could remember which one it is, but like the idea of the maintenance around them, and just kind of like, well, you'd never tear it down, even if the land doesn't support it. Like, what do you mean? Why would we do that? We have to take care of it.
This is an incomplete thought, but the lectionary for last Sunday, the one that we just did, was about Jesus being the cornerstone that was originally the stone that was rejected and has now been chosen as the cornerstone. We turned that over again and again in youth group this Sunday, talking about like, I don't know how rich that metaphor is. And I'm thinking through that now, Sarah, as you're talking about like this beautiful cathedral that's built in a swamp that's like falling apart. And like, I don't know, that's such a beautiful metaphor for the church. Like, we do be struggling, but man, we're trying to keep it together. Like, I love that. I think it's so rich for explaining, I don't know, so many of the things that we encounter in church. Like, I mean, I love church. I work full time in church. I basically live here. And I also have like a lot of complex feelings about church and what we're doing well, what we're not doing well, and what historically has gone well versus what we really need to atone for. And I don't know, that feels so rich to me, Sarah. Like, I had forgotten, you're right, there was a cathedral he talked about that's just like in a swamp. Like, yeah, that seems about right.
This has been
just wow. I love
this has been wonderful. And this image that we're left with, cathedral in a swamp, it reminds me a lot about the early days of COVID. And I imagine that some of those gatherings that you all had online probably felt a little bit like a cathedral in a swamp. And so I'm wanting to talk a little bit about, if you can think back to those days, because I know you all are OG Episcopals. When you think about those times that you all spent together during the tragedies of our day and age, what stands out? What was one of those sort of unforgettable moments, or one of those times where you felt safe in the midst of all of the calamity?
So in no particular order comes to my mind. I clearly remember from this wonderful group, no one ever vocalizing a pressure to meet earlier than what health advisors would recommend, or do anything of that sort, which would bring some hesitancy or compromising feelings among group members. And I dare say that remained true for the entirety of remote gatherings, now that I'm thinking about that out loud. Other touchstones that come to mind there is that while there certainly was times, in a manner that clearly is a prototype of what Kelsey described of current formats, where there was meetings with formation by intent, there were also times where it was simply, let's just gather and chat, which certainly can be a helpful thing as well. What comes to y'all's minds, Kelsey, Sarah?
I can say, I mean, so much, honestly. Like, it's kind of wild to look back at that time for me, because so many of my absolutely like closest friends came from this group. Like, I'm just so indebted to this ministry for that. Like, even if I maybe knew or was acquaintances with some of the folks before meeting with them in PALS, like PALS is, I think, what drove home for me, like those connections. I'm remembering one person that's not on this call, but is also a great like foundational member, our friend Jessie. I'm remembering like I didn't really know her at all before PALS. Like I explicitly met her through PALS, and I had only met her like once, maybe twice in person before we were online. And we're online, and several weeks in, I got really obsessed with Vietnamese food. Once we decided that like takeout was like sort of safe, I started getting like Vietnamese every single Thursday. One of the great things, this ministry was funded back in the day with a 787 collective grant. And so we got like gift cards for like places like Uber Eats or something, like somewhere we could order food from. And so that was like one of the ways we spent our grant money early on, was by making sure everybody had like a nice meal that night. And so we started getting into the habit of ordering Vietnamese food like every Thursday. And I didn't realize it had become such a pattern until my friend Jessie was on the call and was like, oh, Kelsey's got her Vietnamese food. She's got her vermicelli bowl. And I was like, I'm so called out right now. I did not know the rest of y'all noticed this, as I am like absolutely like inhaling vermicelli noodles on this video screen. And I don't know, like just that one moment of knowing that somebody had seen me and was paying attention in ways that I just didn't anticipate, really felt like belonging to me, like recognizing like, oh my gosh, these people care about me, and they've noticed things that maybe I wasn't intentionally putting out. And I think that for me, that spoke to like a level of connection that I didn't realize was there. Like I'm never going to forget her saying something along those lines about my Vietnamese food. Like it's the smallest little mundane thing, but it had so much meaning to me, and she is genuinely like one of my closest friends now. So Sarah, I see you having faces and thoughts and feelings.
No, I also love Jessie. We're gonna have to tell her that we talked about her a lot.
She gets
you mean when she listens to the podcast, she'll recognize that? Yeah, great.
Yes,
exactly.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time necessarily remembering. I mean, I can remember a lot of things that happened in that. I'm not necessarily like, I don't have a moment quite like Kelsey's Vietnamese vermicelli bowl moment.
Yeah, it's the mortification of being known really was the issue for me. So it lodged in my brain pretty firmly.
It is embarrassing to be perceived. Very much relate to that. I will say, so one thing that's coming to mind for me, I live alone. I currently live, I do now, and I did then. And it was very hard for me at times. I wasn't disconnected. Like I had stayed in touch with family, and I had friends, and I had this group. But it was challenging. And I do think that it was something that was very comforting to me a lot of the time. I'm trying to decide which thread I want to follow as I remember kind of some of the PALS moments. We did some formational stuff. I remember I did my best. I think I led maybe one or two of them. We did have some times where we just logged on and chatted. I'm actually remembering though, the first time that this probably wasn't the first time, but it may have been when we all did decide to kind of go and hang out together. Kelsey and I were actually talking about this the other day. I don't remember why, but we all went to Zilker Park. And we now know that, it was probably okay for us to have been there. And honestly, it would have probably been okay for us to have been unmasked. But we didn't really know. And it was still pretty high pandemic times. It was over the summer too. So we all still even though we were outside, we very carefully like sat in a circle. And so it was kind of like you could really only talk to like the people that were right next to you, but we were all still like looking at each other. And that was nice. That was a really nice, like, oh, these people exist. Like they're here. They have faces, and they're real. Because it was all, I do work remotely. I went remote during this period, and I never went back. My company didn't. And I was still working part-time at St. David's, and we were doing our best to try to do an online youth group, which is not a fun thing to try to do. Don't do online youth group. We learned that. I think we learned that about school. Online school, thumbs down. Online youth group, thumbs down. And so I was getting very burnt out. I did kind of start to get pretty burnt out on screens because it wasn't the same thing. It just wasn't. And so when we did start to kind of like do the Zilker thing. I was like, oh, okay, yes. Like these people are real, and I will see them again someday. And that was a good day. I remember. Do you guys remember that? Kelsey does. We talked about this the other day.
There are at least a couple Zilker gatherings that for sure happened during that time that you're talking about. And I'm just now thinking of this. Well, this is a half-formed thought. We'll see if it makes sense or if it's truthful as it comes out of my mouth. But when I think about the size of this group at the time that there was a transition to online-only gatherings, one thing that an online gathering does that might not be present on an in-person one is that it blows back to a greater degree the chance of basically just being a wallflower of a group of this size, at least. Like if you're like a 200-person webinar, you could just turn the camera off and have coffee and tea the rest of the morning or something. But there was no Zoom equivalent of just focusing on the sports game at the TV at the bar or being hyper-focused on the snacks that were on the table. I don't think anybody felt pressured saying I have to speak here, but I won't claim to have total clairvoyance, I guess, on that regard. But it did feel like the one and only agenda, the one and only thing that was underlying any particular gathering was, let's just actually talk and get to know one another.
I'm also remembering something that we could actually start doing again. We don't do this anymore. But we would do check-ins, like formalized check-ins like Kelsey and I do with the youth group. We'd all do a rosebud thorn or, a high-low something or other. And we don't, that was like when I can't think of the last time. I mean, all of these people are my close friends now. So I do feel like I have a very good pulse on, I hope I do, their lives and how they're doing and what their lows and their highs and like what they're dealing with. But I don't know if I can remember the last time that I was like, Adam, Kelsey's husband, what was your high for the week? Like, I don't hear those things anymore, because we did sort of get into a rhythm of when we would start the gathering, especially if it was a more chatty, maybe kind of, we would do it on both kinds, not just chat nights. But yeah, I don't know if I have been in a setting like that's formalized for like my adult friends, where we can like talk about like, this is my high, this is my low, like the kind of that kind of formalized, intentional, how are you doing structure. And that's an interesting way to get to know a group of people. Yeah, that I learned a lot about people that I probably wouldn't have gotten to know. Like, I think I know my friends' husbands very well. I would say that Cameron has graduated to more than my friend's husband at this point in our time of knowing each other. But like, I don't know if I would have. I don't know if I had that. Would I know Adam as well, Kelsey? Probably not. I don't know. I don't know if I like. There's people that I probably didn't get to see in that way or hear about in that way until when we started doing that, and we don't do it anymore. And I kind of wonder if we should, now that I've thought of it.
Well, I mean, this is Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I love that idea. And I also will say, this is what came to mind when you said that, was that that meme or TikTok sound. It's like, whatever happened to hello? How are you? Like, yeah. Thinking as soon as you said this, I'm just going to start our next pals gathering off with, whatever happened to hello? How are you?
It made me start thinking about like the things that we were, again, talking about death, right? Like there was a death of sorts in the midst of this that forced us to create new rhythms and new opportunities. And I hear you saying like this was something really good that like needed to live on, has kind of died out as well, right? Like even though we've emerged, whatever that means, coming out of COVID-19. But I'm also wondering, like, was there then like almost a not a relapse, but like a falling back where we were so desperate for connection, where it was like, yeah, every Thursday, absolutely, we're going to have our time. And now, like you said, you meet every other week, right? And so where there was this like oh my God, I'm just so tired, I can't do all these things anymore. And like almost like we want to do all the things and now because we can, and now we're like really tired and don't want to do all the things anymore. So there's like a pulling back. And so I'm just curious of what the belonging is, again, the word we keep using, but like what has that meant for life for those who are part of the Episcopals that make up the Pals post-pandemic, as you're working out this new norm, this new reality in some sort of like resurrected life beyond what was in the midst of the Zoom world we lived in for so long.
I have a lot of thoughts on this, but I want to hear from Sarah and Cameron first because I have to think about this all the time as the paid supervisor of this group. So I'm very interested to hear from the folks who don't think about this every week.
I'm trying to remember how we started out. I think we did sort of start out as an every Thursday kind of situation.
Weekly.
Yeah, and then we sometimes, and that was sometimes, like we would just chat. Sometimes we would have someone say something, like give a sort of a Devo. Sometimes it was just Compline, if I remember correctly. And then I think, and again, you'll have to correct me on my timeline. We did try to maintain the weekly schedule. Did we try to maintain the weekly schedule when we started doing this in person? When did we start doing things in person again? I don't actually remember when we decided that it was it when we had all kind of reached a core group of vaccination? I would assume that was probably when it happened.
Let me
like spring 2021.
I think I can figure this out if I can ask a different question. When did the communication channels switch from GroupMe to Discord? Do we remember that off the top of our head?
That is a very good marker.
Yeah. Don't mind us, listeners. You're just watching how the sausage was made over here.
There's so many things I want to ask about the move
how
from GroupMe
far
to Discord.
Back does the Discord chat go? Let's find that out. I can do that right now. Okay.
Yeah.
Early 2022 is when we made that. But I think that we had started doing in-person stuff before that. I think we did.
Okay, if you're sure about that, I was going to guess soon thereafter, but it sounds like we're in agreement. It was orbiting around that point in time in some direction or another.
I don't think that we would have waited until 2022 to start meeting again.
If you guys remember, there was a time where we did like very cobbled together MacGyvered hybrid. So we would have in person, but then there'd be like somebody with a laptop who was like representing our online piece.
Yes.
It was awkward and strange, but we were doing our best to try to like include everybody. I do remember that, and I'm sure that happened. I bet you that started happening in 2021 would be my guess.
That started happening after Jenny Campbell left. Yes. So that would have been fall of 2021.
Yep. You're right. Okay. Hey, we did it. We have carbon dated this group.
Yay.
Go team. I think to come back to Phil's
oral history
question. To go back to Phil's question about like what the belonging looked like at that time, I think what I felt, so I didn't actually take over in a professional sense as a facilitator for this group until like last year. So up until then, I was just a member. And I know that what I felt was, I know early in the pandemic, I was like, oh my gosh, y'all, I was so busy pre-pandemic and I didn't need that. And I want to just cling to this energy of like putting only the most important things on my calendar. And then that lovely sentiment did not last long. Because once the pandemic, like not died down, but once we got to a place where we felt comfortable enough to schedule things, to do fun things, I did start to put like more and more things on my calendar. And by that point, the folks that we were meeting with in PALS, by and large, had become such like a core group of friends that what I saw happening was that like we were getting together once a week for trivia. And so if we're already gathering over here for fun and, we're talking in our group chats or whatever, then when it comes to the church programming, sometimes it'd be like, oh, well, I just saw you guys like 3 days ago. I don't know. I'm kind of busy this week. Maybe I'll skip PALS, And so also like, because at the time, I think PALS for a while there was like was feeding me socially so well that then when we started to get fed socially in other places, I kind of was like, well, I'm not sure, like not actually, I want to say this, it wasn't like a conscious decision. I wasn't like, church ministry. Why? Like I think it was just a simple formula of like, well, I wanted social connection and I got it over here instead. So now I don't actually have to go to that thing, and instead I can stay home in my PJs. And so I think like that was kind of my experience. And I think we kind of, in my opinion, we kind of bumbled along there for a while. I feel like there was a while there where PALS was like really fellowship focused, but maybe not necessarily feeding us in that fellowship way because we saw both each other and other people so much outside of PALS. I don't know. That's my perspective.
I have some thoughts that is going back a little bit to the original question about the COVID shutdown bringing a death of sorts. And I've said this about church ministries and work in general, but one benefit that came from that time and I think this is more than just a silver lining, I think this is at least one tier higher up, is that it gave... Hey, honey, how you doing? Sorry about that.
That's our godson.
Yes. Yeah.
All unwelcome here.
Join pals.
That is
you can
true.
Have
That is
godparents
true.
for your children.
That's true. That's our motto.
Yeah. No. Here's what came to my mind during that, and I'm going to speak just about church work more broadly for just a quick second here. But one thing that happened starting March 2020 onward is that it helped a lot of places realize what was valued, and it also helped a lot of people realize what wasn't missed that they had previously been dumping a lot of time and energy to. And the very curt phrase that a priest friend of mine said that I just love was that he went, some point around May, like me and his boss at the church he's at, we just looked at each other and realized not one member has said, oh, damn, I really missed that Lent program. And guess what they had been pouring so much of their time and effort into every spring for quite a few years in a row. When I think about Episcopals, you've already heard us mention how when we started, there was a habit that was entrenched, even though it was only a couple months old, of, all right, meet every Thursday. And while some of those were at people's apartments, there was at least a few that was meet at St. David's. So in other words, on Thursday night, drive to downtown Austin from wherever you are at around 5:30 or 6 o'clock, and may the Lord be with you as you navigate traffic, depending on that time.
Amen.
Yeah. And
also with you.
Yes. Hey, look at you. You've already heard how that has not... You have already heard how this group has not been calcified into that already. And maybe the pandemic helped with that in terms of, oh, we're going to have nimbleness and organicness ingrained into it already. So what Kelsey just said is very true about you do have to at least have some goals and intention of, hey, let's try and do something here rather than just float. But at the same time, I can think of multiple times in this group's history where people have been more than willing to just calmly but clearly state their ideas about how to zig when we had previously zagged. Whether it be, hey, we used to meet every week, what if we do this? Oh, and let's try this pattern instead of socializing and then formation every other time. Or, hey, we had done GroupMe, now let's do Discord, or lots of examples like that. Forced flexibility, among other things, helps awaken your God-given capability for flexibility that you might or might not have realized beforehand.
That's good.
No,
Really good.
Thank you.
That's why he preaches.
Oh, you're too kind.
I can hear it there. Sarah, did you have any thoughts on that question?
Can you repeat the original question? Because I totally hear and agree with what Cameron said, but I don't remember what question he was answering when he got off on it.
Then my work here is done.
You're done. I mean, really, like, I think the next question, or like what's emerging in my head after hearing Kelsey and Cameron talk about it, is really this idea of like prioritization. Really, like what makes Episcopal still be a priority? And then I hear you saying like this has become like my people and my good group of friends, and like this is more than just like church programming now. Like this is like part of my livelihood and my people. And so I'm curious, one, like how does that maintain a priority for you? And two, then like, what does that mean for people who are new coming in the midst of this?
Yeah. Okay. Now I'm totally on board.
Two different questions, but like
totally
I think
on board, locked in. So for one, yes, there's definitely a social aspect of it. But it's also like we have a core group that we see pretty regularly for this, but we also have some people who I still really enjoy spending time with that can only come maybe once a month to a PALS event, or every other, we have one really good friend, Becca, who she works nights. And sometimes she's like, hey, I would love to come to PALS, but I need to sleep. Like I will be about to get up to go to work for the day during PALS, and I can only come, but we love her company. Like, so I like to see her when she can come. And so there's folks that we, because of what their lives are like, we don't necessarily, they haven't, they're just not able to come as often. And so when they can, that's great. And we want to see that. I also, I work with Kelsey at St. David's, and we work with, I work with her in the youth part. I don't support her for the young adult portion of it, even though, I try to be a leader in the group. I don't get paid for that.
Emotionally supports me. She just isn't paid to support me.
I don't get paid for this part. I get paid for the youth.
You're in
and so
jewels in your heavenly crown.
What is that, Cameron? What about my heavenly crown?
You're getting jewels in your heavenly crown.
Exactly.
Because
So
that pays rent.
So, because
Especially in
I
Austin.
am at St. David's with the youth during formation hour, I don't really get to do a lot of like adult formation. It would be great if I could go to Bible study. But I teach, like right now I'm teaching confirmation. And when I'm not teaching confirmation, I'm either teaching a lesson with Kelsey to the 6th through 12th graders, or I am off for the summer. And I try to I do typically end up being off during the summer. That's just kind of how the pattern I followed. So, it's really nice to have adult formation. Like, it's really nice to talk about topics like this with adults. And, we feed people. Part of the rotation, part of the deal is that we get dinner, out of it. And I live by myself. I like to think of myself as very independent, but that's one last thing that I have to think about when we have weeks for Pals, where I have to think about what am I eating on that Thursday. It's probably going to be something that Pal sponsors, that's very nice. Yeah. Like I provide for myself 24/7. So, getting to check that off on some lists is really nice. I guess then those major things are really, really kind of the core of it. Ultimately, I just really, really enjoy this kind of Christian community. When I was in college, I met some of the ways that I got connected through this group was staying in touch with some people that I was friends with in my college ministry. And my college ministry basically changed my life. So I don't want to miss out on being part of further life-giving communities. So I've tried to prioritize being plugged in to adult Christian communities as much as I can.
Yeah.
Can I pitch another thought?
Really quick?
Yeah. You're talking about your college ministry, and that reminded me of something that the priest of that ministry said when describing it. Was she tried to make that place be a faith factory, by that a spot where people feel empowered to go and, yes, precisely, to test and probe and see what it is they actually believe. College student, perhaps the first time a person's taking ownership of that. And I see characteristics of that in Episcopals. You already heard us mention how there's topics like Sarah said, I'd be interested in learning about death, and a person was happy to put something together and make that happen. And same with money and various other topics as well. And in fact, I'm struggling, if I were to devil's advocate, I am struggling to think of a gathering where it felt like just fluff or just going on for the sake of going on. And one benefit of that is the people that you meet, you see them more and more as people, or you see more layers of them as you go on. And that connection naturally begets a desire to stay connected and grow further.
That's lovely, Cameron. I want to I want to kind of reach. You get all the credit. Don't worry. Gold star. I want to kind of basically retweet what Sarah has said, but with my italics nearby. But essentially, there's two things that really pulled me to Pals. One of them, I've already talked about the friends and the socialness. That's a real great word. But there was a time when receiving a paid meal was a lifeline. And it's not like I would have necessarily gone hungry without it, but I wouldn't have gotten, for example, some cool Vietnamese food. I would have been eating, I don't know, bad leftovers or, a sandwich or something not fun, right? And so that, honestly, that has been, I think, something we've really clung to is important to our ministry, is that everybody that comes is going to get physically fed. And I really try hard to never expect anybody to pay for that. And I don't know, I say that as kind of, as the representative from St. David's, but food is honestly really expensive, and it costs a lot to basically run a ministry where you are feeding somebody at one point every single week and now every 2 weeks. And, anytime, I don't know, that I talk to folks about that, sometimes they're really surprised. They're like, oh my gosh, this whole thing's covered. And we went to this nice restaurant. And I'm like, yep. And if you feel any feelings about that, may I recommend that you pledge to our good church? I'm constantly redirecting them because we're at this time fully financially supported by St. David's, which I'm very thankful for. But I don't know. That's one thing. That's definitely one thing that pulled me in, was I was like, sometimes I'd be like, I don't know if I feel up to it this week, but I don't have to worry about dinner and it'll feed both my husband and I. Let's go. And then the other thing, to kind of retweet what Sarah was saying, was that I am employed by the church and therefore don't get to do many churchy things as a participant. Like, I don't get to go to formation. I'm teaching formation. You know, I don't get to go to Wednesday night Bible study. I'm leading youth group, right? And so having an opportunity to actually look into, I wanted to say investigate, but that's not quite the right word. But look into complex topics where I can be like, I don't know how I feel about sin. Let's talk about it, you know, is really powerful to me and a safe thing that I just don't get very often as a church employee. But then to kind of sum up everything we're talking about, though, I think my first thought that I wrote down as soon as you said, you know, what do people come for? And I think, honestly, that answer is going to be different depending on who you talk to. I think there are people who come to our group because, you know, maybe they need a social group. They don't have that core group of friends yet, because making friends as an adult is really hard. And they just moved into the area, or they've been bogged down working from home for years and they haven't had a chance to meet people, you know, or they're coming you know, to get that formation aspect outside of a physical church setting, because we are often not meeting at St. David's. And they're coming to say, like, I'm happy to, like, talk about God in a casual, informal way, but I'm not ready to walk into a church, right? Like, I think it really depends on who you speak to. I think every person in our group is going to come with their own set of desires and needs, which is not to say that Pals is like the world's greatest ministry and we're everything to everyone, but just that I'm glad that so many people seem to have found something that they were searching for in this group. And I know that I did. Like, I attended it as a participant long before I was ever employed by St. David's. And that's really meaningful to me.
Well, thank you all for sharing. And so if there's someone listening or watching who wants to be a part of Episcopals, what information do they need to have, and who can they reach out to?
Oh, great question. Yeah, if you go to stdave.org, stdav.org, you can find information on our ministries there. Episcopals is listed as a group, and you can, like, request to join the group, and honestly, you will get reached out to by me and say, hey friends, do you want to go get coffee and talk to me? We get a lot of people asking there, and I always love to do one-on-one meetings with folks, because maybe Pals isn't really what they need, but they really want, you know, like a church home on a Sunday, and they just want to know somebody before they come to worship, right? Like, right. I'm here kind of as a touchstone for that. So I would love to receive any of those. But basically, if you request to join the group on our website, that'll send an email to me, and I will respond at some point. Not maybe that day, because that's not how good I am at email, but nearby, the next couple of days, I will get to you eventually.
Love
Kelsey,
it
could be I just misheard, but I heard you spell the website as STDAV, and I just want to make sure people know there's an E at the end of that, STDAVE.org.
Yes,
okay.
Thank you. Yeah, we refer to St. David of Wales very casually and informally here. It's our buddy Dave, St. Dave. Yes, thank you, Cameron.
Love it. Brother Dave.
Well, and I can attest to Kelsey's a great conversation partner. You were, I think, one of the second or third people that I sat and had lunch with, I think, when I started this job a little over a year ago. So we had a lovely lunch together. Where did we go?
We went to Kirby Lane, and I remember, so I'm dairy free, and they served this dairy free the cashew queso, and I was like so excited about it, and they brought
Changed
it out.
my life.
Ooh, it was so tasty that I told them they needed to take it back, because it was clearly real cheese, and they were poisoning me, and they were like, that's the fake stuff. And I was like, are you so sure though? And
it literally changed my life.
So
Kirby Lane is an important Austin staple for those who are listening.
Long live Kirby Lane.
All right, well, we are wrapping up. But before we go, I wanted to ask if you all had any word or something encouraging that you wanted to share with those who are listening, who are young adults trying to find a sense of belonging in their own communities.
I think I would want to say that this is very half-formed here, but I would want to say that if you are feeling like a little lost and isolated and like you don't have your people yet, I truly believe like that your people are out there, right? Like, I mean, 5 years ago, I did not know any of these people, and I speak and talk to them and see them every single day. Like Sarah and I have a joke right now that like we don't go 48 hours without seeing each other, right? Like
it's not really a joke.
It's
really not actually a joke.
The joke is that it's our reality, but like I never could have dreamed that could have happened when I moved to Austin 5 years ago from my hometown, and that honestly is because of church, like the church network for me, and so I'm so thankful for that. And so I do want to just say, like, I don't know, if you're stuck there and you're not sure and you're still searching, I have to believe your people are there, and you just gotta find them.
I was gonna say actually something extremely similar, more of along the lines of like, it's not too late to find those people. It's really never too late. That's one of the reasons why my college ministry was so life-giving for me, was because I had been feeling like it was, and then suddenly it was not. And it's worth it to keep looking for it. If you think that it's not, and you're just not going to find those people, and you should just like, give up and be with your, just hang out with your spouse, or if you don't have a spouse, if that's ever something if that discouraging thought has ever crossed your mind, I completely concur with Kelsey. They're out there, and I would just add that it is completely worth it to keep showing up and trying and looking for it.
It is worth the mortification of being known and perceived. 100%. Yes, thank you, Sarah.
Whoa. Just going to drop that at the end. Jeez.
A little bit of a callback to me struggling with being perceived in a Zoom call. Cameron, what are you thinking, my friend?
Well, I'm thinking about a line I heard the same month that Episcopal started, but a different event. Human beings long for connection, but are so often scared to death of it, apropos of what you just brought up again. So I guess if there's anyone listening who might or might not be intrigued by some of the stuff we're talking about, it's okay to get out of the comfort zone to try and to give it a shot and to go to that group. And if the worst, I don't even want to use the phrase worst case scenario, but even if you don't like the group, you will go home that night and you'll probably have some creative juices flowing of why you didn't like it or what more you're looking for, et cetera, et cetera. So in that respect, there isn't really a failure per se. There's just additional feedback and learning and self-awareness. That can be wholly healing and learning more about yourself, which can lead to greater connection with your own self as you find ways to connect with other people.
Well, I love that. Y'all have been wonderful conversation partners. It's been wonderful to learn more about Episcopals and the incredible things y'all are doing. And I'm so glad that you found a great sense of belonging with one another and through this wonderful community. Cameron, you had mentioned before we started recording, actually, that you have a prayer. Do you mind ending on the prayer for us?
Yeah. I don't know if I've ever thought of it as a good ending to a group prayer, but let's see how it goes. This is called A Prayer to the God Who Fell from Heaven, and John Shea is the one who authored this. Poetic in nature, but let us pray. If you had stayed tight-fisted in the sky and watched us thrash with all the patience of a pipe smoker, I might pray like a golden bullet aimed at your hearts. But the story says you cried, and so heavy was the tear, you fell with it to earth, where, like a baritone in a bar, it is never time to go home. So you move among us, twisting every straight line into Picasso, stealing kisses from pinched lips, holding our hand in the dark. So now, when I pray, I sit and turn my mind like a television knob till you are there, with your large open hands spreading my life before me like a Sunday tablecloth, and pulling up a chair yourself. For by now, the secret is out. You are home. Amen.
That was lovely.
Yeah.
Okay, so
really
now
nice.
for the next 30 minutes, we will talk about that poem or that prayer as well. I mean, that's talk about some imagery to unpack in there. That was fabulous. No, I seriously, I need to find myself in Austin some Thursday night when I can come join Episcopals, because this is awesome. I love the conversation, love where y'all's minds go and just how deep it gets in the conversation, just all over the place. It's how my mind works. So I feel like I'm in with kindred spirits right now. But super grateful for y'all. Shout out to St. David's for doing incredible work there as well, and for y'all for being faithful to the ministry. And again, friends, if you are listening to this and you want to be a part, check out Episcopals. Find them at stdave.org. Are y'all on the social medias too? Do you do the social media thing? Oh yeah. You can find. Okay.
Episcopals has social media?
Okay, not Episcopal, St. David's.
St. David's.
I'm not taking on that job. Love you all.
Nope, not trying to give you more to do, Kelsey.
No. If anyone is interested and they can't remember the web address, just look it up on Facebook or whatnot. You will be connected quickly to Kelsey in due time.
Well, again, blessings to you all, and for all listening. We're grateful that you've hung out with us this time, and we pray that you go forward and find belonging wherever you are as well. Go in peace, my friends.
Amen.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Collective Voice,
the premier podcast of the 787 Collective.
Click the link in our show notes to connect with us and learn how you can be the lucky recipient of free 787 Collective swag.
And don't forget, when you rate and review us, you're tricking the algorithm for the common good.